everyone, this is Miss Hazelson. Today we're going to be working on Unit 3 LT1 notes, finding the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor, or GCF, of two numbers is the largest number that divides evenly into both numbers. So let's put this into practice. Let's find the greatest common factor of 6 and 9. I'm going to start with 6, and I know 1 times 6 is 6. I know 2 times 3 is 6. And I'm going to keep going in numerical order. I'm going to go 3 times 2 is 6. Well, when I look, these are essentially exactly the same. They're just repeated in a separate order. I call that rounding the bend. Once you round the bend, you can just stop. You don't have to keep going. So I'm going to erase these because that's the same. So I don't even have to look at those. So those are all my factors of 6. Now I'm going to find my factors of 9. And I always start with 1, so 1 times 9 is 9. 2 won't go into 9, so I'm going to skip that one. And then 3 times 3 is 9. There's nothing times 4, and really that 3 times 3, that's like rounding the bend because we hit that 3. So when I look at my factors of 6 and my factors of 9, I see I have a 3 right here, and I also have a 3 right there. So my greatest common factor of 6 and 9 is 3. Okay, let's do the same with 8 and 12. I'm going to find all my factors of 8. So I know 1 times 8 is 8. I know 2 times 4 is 8. 3 will not go into 8. So I'm going to skip that one. And then I'm back at 4. Well, I already have a 4, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm just going to stop because I rounded the bend. Now I'm going to find all my factors of 12. I know 1 times 12 is 12. 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 4 is 12. Well, then I would put a 4 here, but because I already have a 4, I've already rounded the bend, so I can stop right there. So I'm just going to look at all of those and find what's my greatest common of all of them. Well, I see I have a 4. Oops. I have a 4 right here, and I have a 4 right here. So my greatest common factor between 8 and 12 is 4. All right, let's find the greatest common factor between 5 and 10. So I'm going to find my 5, and I know 1 times 5 is 5. 2 won't go in there, 3 won't go in there, 4 won't go in there, and now I'm back at 5. So I already have a 5 on there, so I can just stop. There's nothing else that can go into 5. So I'm going to find my factors of 10, and I know 1 times 10 is 10. I know 2 times 5 is 10. 3 won't go into 10. There's nothing times 4 that equals 10. And now I'm back at 5, but I already have a 5 on there, so I'm going to stop. So when I look at them, I have a 5 here and a 5 here. So I know my greatest common factor between 5 and 10 is 5. Let's do it with 2 and 7. Factors of 2, 1 and 2. And that's it. Now I'm back at 2, and that would be 2 times 1, so I've already rounded the bend. And let's do 7. I know 1 times 7. 2 won't go into 7. Nothing times 3 is 7. Nothing times 4 is 7. Nothing times 5 is 7. Nothing times 6 is 7. And now I'm back at 7. So I know my only factors are 1 and 7. Well, when I look, the only thing in common between 2 and 7 is that 1. So my greatest common factor between 2 and 7 is 1. Okay, so now we're going to find the GCF of two variables. The GCF of the two variables is the variable with the lowest exponent that you see in the terms. So to find the GCF, when you have exponents and variables, you're going to look at your variable, and whatever the smaller exponent is going to be the GCF. So when I have a 3 and a 5, my GCF is going to be my lower of the two. So it's going to be x to the third. Number 6 says I have a y to the second and y to the 7th. So my GCF is going to be the lowest of the two, or the lower of the two. So y to the second is lower than y to the 7th. So my GCF is y to the second. So now we're going to put the two pieces together. Okay, so first I'm going to find the factors of my numbers. So first I'm going to find the factors of 10, and I know 1 times 10 is 10, and 2 times 5 is 10. And those are all for that one. And now I have 15, and I know 1 times 15 is 15. 2 won't go into 15, but 3 will. 3 times 5. Now I'm at 4. 4 won't go into 15, and now I'm back at 5. So I found all my factors because I've rounded the bend. So I know my greatest common factor is 5. Okay, but now I have my exponents that I have to look at. So I have x to the second and x to the third. Well, x to the second is smaller. So my greatest common factor for this one, because the 5 is the number that's in common, and then x to the second would be my letter and my exponent in common. So my GCF would be 5x squared. Okay, so let's find our greatest common factor between 3x and 5x squared. So I have a 3, 1 times 3, and that's it. And I have a 5, and 1 times 5. So my greatest common factor between 3 and 5 is that 1. And then when I look, I have x. And remember, if there's no number on there, there's really a little 1. So I have x to the first and x to the second. Well, x to the first is smaller. So my greatest common factor between 3x and 5x squared, my number would be a 1, and then it would just be that x, 1x. You can put that little 1. It's not common to put it there, but if that helps you, you can put that little 1 there. So here are the steps to find the greatest common factor. So first, you're going to find the largest number that divides into each coefficient. Then you're going to find the smallest exponent of the variable and divide each term by your greatest common factor. And then write your new polynomial multiplied by the greatest common factor. So let's try a couple of those. All right, so let's look at number 9. We have 12a squared plus 16a. The first step is to find the greatest common factor between 12 and 16. I'm going to find my 12s. 1 times 12 is 12. 2 times 6 is 12. And 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, now I'm going to find my factors of 16. I know 1 times 16. 2 times 8. 3 won't go into 16, but 4 times 4 goes into 16. When I look at that, the numbers, that's the greatest common is 4. So my greatest common factor is 4 for my number, okay? Or if you remember it back, step 2 was finding the smallest exponent. So I have a to the second and a to the first. Okay, so the smallest exponent would be a to the first. So my greatest common factor is going to be 4a. And you can put that first on there if you want, but you don't have to. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite 12a squared plus 16a. And now we're going to divide out the greatest common factor. So I'm going to divide this by 4a and divide this by 4a. Okay, so when we take that out, I'm going to put 4a in front of my parentheses. And now first I'm going to divide my numbers. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And then a to the second divided by a to the first. Remember, we subtract those exponents to get our answers. So 2 minus 1 is 1, so I just have 1a left. Plus 16 divided by 4 is 4. And I have 1a on the top and 1a on the bottom. So it's a to the first divided by a to the first. Well, those just cancel each other out, so that's not going to be there at all. So I'm just going to close that. So 4a times 3a plus 4 would be your final answer. Okay, so let's do number 10. 14r to the third plus 6r to the second minus 4r. So let's see what they all have in common. Okay, so I have 14, so I know 1 times 14. 2 times 7, and that's all there are for factors there. And then I'm going to find my greatest common factor of 6. So I know 1 times 6, 2 times 3, and that's all I have there. And now I have my 4, and I know 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. Okay, so if I look at my greatest common factor between all of those, I have a 2 here, a 2 here, and a 2 here. So my GCF, my number, oops, that should be a C. My number is a 2. And then I'm going to look and find my smallest exponent. Well, I have a 3 here, a 2 here, and a 1 right there. So it's just going to be that R. I'm going to rewrite. So 14 R to the third plus 6 R to the second minus 4R. Okay, and I'm going to take all of that. I'm going to divide it by my greatest common factor. So I'm going to take this and divide this by 2R. Take this one, divide that by 2. Oops. Should be a 2. 2R, and take this one and divide that by 2R. Okay, so 14 divided, well, I'm going to start by putting my 2R out front. Start my parentheses. 14 divided by 2 is 7. And R to the third divided by R to the first is R to the second. And then I have plus next, so I'm going to say plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. And R to the second divided by R to the first is just R to the first, or just R. And then I have minus next, so I'm going to stick in my minus. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then R divided by R, there's nothing left. Those are going to cancel each other out. So we're just going to close that. Okay, number 11, 5x plus 30y. Okay, so the first thing is find the greatest common factor between my numbers. I know my factors of 5 are 1 times 5. And 30, I know 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 4 won't go in there, 5 times 6, okay, and now I'm back at 6, and I already have a 6, so I know I rounded the bend, so I'm done. Another way that you can do this easily, you guys, is if you take that 30 and do 30 divided by 2, and you'll get that 15. Then do 30 divided by 3, and you'll get 10. 30 divided by 4. If it comes out a decimal, don't write that 4 down because it has to go in evenly. So then you're going to do 30 divided by 5. So that's one way when you get into these bigger numbers, and if you're not sure how to find all the factors, just go ahead and take your biggest number and then divide it by each one of those below. Okay, but my greatest common factor between these ones are 5. So my GCF for my number is 5, okay? And then I'm going to look at my exponents. Well, I have an x here and a y here. Well, you can't have a greatest common factor between those because they're different variables. They're different letters. We can't. So our greatest common factor is just a 5. So I'm going to rewrite 5x plus 30y, and I'm going to divide this by my greatest common factor, which is a 5, and divide this by my greatest common factor, which is a 5. Okay, so 5 divided by 5. Well, first I'm going to put my greatest common factor on the outside. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and then I still have my x there. I'm not getting rid of that. Plus 30 divided by 5 is 6, and I still have my y there. Okay, so let's find the greatest common factor between 12x squared plus 3x minus 9. Okay, so first I'm going to find my 12. So remember, you always know you're going to start with 1. So 1 times 12. Okay, and now you're going to take 12 divided by 2, and you'll get 6. 12 divided by 3, and you'll get 4. And now I'm at 4, but I already have a 4, so I'm not going to write that one down. Okay, 3, I know it's just 1 and 3. And then 9, I have 1 times 9. 2 won't go in there, and then 3 times 3. Okay, so when I look, my greatest common factor that they all have in common is a 3. So my GCF is for my number is going to be a 3. When I look, I have 12x squared here. I have just an x here. I don't have an x here. So there's no letter or variable that's going to be in common for all of them. So it's just going to be my 3 and nothing else. So I'm going to rewrite 12x squared plus 3x minus 9. And I'm going to divide all of those by my greatest common factor, which is just a 3. Okay, my 3 comes on the outside. And first I start with my numbers. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Okay, and I still have that x squared. That didn't go anywhere. Plus 3 divided by 3 is 1, and I still have that x. minus 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then I'm going to close it. Okay, we're going to work on the last two here. Okay, just like we were doing before, we're going to find our greatest common factor between the number first. So I have 4, and I know 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. I have a 12, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. And now I'm back at 4, so I know I'm done. And then I have 8. I know 1 times 8, 2 times 4. There's no 3, and now I'm back at 4. So when I'm looking at those, the greatest common factor that I see in all of them, I have a 4 here, I have a 4 here, and a 4 here. So my GCF is 4 for the number, and let's look. Do they have a letter in common? I have x to the third, x to the second, and just an x. So they all, yes, they have that x in common. So I'm going to rewrite 4x to the third plus 12x squared minus 8x. Okay, and I'm going to divide out my GCF from each one of those. So I'm going to divide this by 4x, this by 4x, and this by 4x. Now my 4x comes out front. Okay, 4 divided by 4 is 1. X to the third divided by x to the first is x to the second, plus 12 divided by 4 is 3, and x to the second minus x to the first would be x to the first, minus 8 divided by 4 is 2, and those two x's are going to cancel each other out. Then you're just going to close it. Okay, number 14, last one. We have 5x to the fourth minus 15x to the third plus 20x squared. Okay, so my numbers, I'm going to start with 5, and I know 1 times 5, and that's it. And now I have 15. You don't have to take that negative in front of that 15. You can just take a 15. So 1 times 15, 2 won't go in there, 3 times 5, 4 won't go in there. I'm back at 5, so I know I'm done. And then 20, I know 1 times 20, and again, these higher ones, you can say 20 divided by 2, and you'll get 10. 20 divided by 3, you're going to end up with a decimal, so there's nothing. 4 times 5, and now I'm at 5, but I already have a 5 written down. When I look, I see my greatest common factor between all of them is that 5. So my GCF for my number is that 5. And then I have x to the fourth, x to the third, and x to the second. Well, x to the second is the smallest of the 3, so I'm going to use that one. I'm going to rewrite 5x to the fourth minus 15x to the third plus 20x to the second. Now I'm going to divide out my GCF, so 5x squared Okay, I'm going to put my 5x squared out front. 5 divided by 5 is 1. X to the fourth divided by x to the second is x to the second. Minus 15 divided by 5 is 3. X to the third divided by x to the second is just an x. And then 20 divided by 5 is 4. And then that x to the second and x to the second are going to cancel out. So I'm just going to close that. So that ends your notes for Unit 3, LT1. If you have questions, don't hesitate to pop on for a Google Meet. You know when we'll be available, or send us a Schoology message and we will get back to you.